I have the pleasure to introduce you to a phenomenal woman, and that's Miss Indra Nooyi. She's the former chairman and CEO of PepsiCo between 2006 and 2019. And if you're not familiar with PepsiCo, that is a Fortune 50 company that operates in over 180 countries, okay? While she was there, her title was Chief Architect of Performance with Purpose. That means that she was responsible for the needs, or she was really responsive to the needs of the world around her, which meant that she was looking at protecting the planet, empowering her associates, as well as the people in the communities that she served. During her tenure there, she actually grew PepsiCo by 80% in regards to revenue, as well as the shareholder return by 162%. That was unheard of and just phenomenal in itself with just looking at those stats. Ms. Nooyi also has worked in finance, strategy, business processes, optimization, corporate platforms and innovation, procurement, investor relations, information technology, and so many more arenas, so many hats that she has worn. And if that wasn't enough, Ms. Indra also sits on the board of Amazon and their audit committee. She's a member of the International Advisory Council of Temasek. She's also a member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. And where I received the great pleasure of meeting Ms. Nooyi was when she was inducted as the class of 1951, chair of the study of leadership at West Point, specifically in the BS&L department. Some of her awards, but definitely not an exhaustive list. In 2007, she was awarded the Padma Bhushan Award, which is the third highest civilian award from the government of India. She was also named Outstanding American by Choice by the US State Department. And in 2019, her portrait was inducted into the Smithsonian National Portrait Gallery. Wow. And she also holds a BS from the Madras Christian College, an MBA from the Indian Institute of Management in Calcutta, and a Master of Public and Private Management from Yale University. She's also a loving wife and a mother of 2 wonderful daughters. And so without further ado, I introduce you to a wonderful mentor and a person that I look up to and am so inspired by, and that's Indra Nooyi. Thank you for joining us, Indra.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you for having me. It's a privilege and a pleasure to be talking to you all.
Absolutely. And if you don't mind, I'd like to jump right into the questions.
Okay, sure.
Okay, perfect. So a lot of people have probably already Googled you. I know I did it because I wanted to know more about you. And so what I'd like to know from you is, what can't we find out about you on the internet that you want people to know?
Oh, you know, the problem with the internet is if you really do a lot of search, my life is an open book. But I think the one thing you may not know is that life outside my work is quite boring. I just stay home. I don't do anything else. I just stay home. I read all the time. I'm not a social person. I'm actually, come to think of it, I'm a bit of an introvert. People don't realize that. Even when I'm in big groups and parties, I try to move towards the fringe. And if I have to socialize and shake hands with a lot of people, I do it. But I'm not a person that likes to be out there all the time. So my most comfortable spot is just in my home, reading a book with my feet up.
Absolutely. And I think probably a lot of women that will listen to this webinar probably can really understand what you're saying, you know, because even in the military, you know, we have these situations where we're put in front of people, but there's a lot of us that would rather, you know, just kind of be on our own and be with our books. And speaking of that, what books are you reading right now?
You know, until about a month and a half ago, I was reading everything to do with women, intergenerational living, childcare, balancing work and family, integrating work and family, because that's the book I'm writing. Then all of a sudden COVID hits. And I'm now co-chairing the Reopen Connecticut Task Force. So the past few days, everything I'm reading is about COVID. How do you reopen an economy? What testing do you have to do? What are the efficacies of the different tests? How did other states or countries or counties open up? What lessons can we learn? What does it take to reopen an economy? That's all I'm reading. And believe it or not, and don't tell anybody this, in between my reading all this stuff, I just started reading all the new Danielle Steele books. I'm kind of liking it. So that's the other side of me.
Awesome, awesome. Well, that is great to hear, that human side of you, because what we see is this phenomenal woman that's making so many waves and impacting so many areas out there. And congratulations again with becoming the lead of the Reopen Connecticut Task Force. That's amazing.
I thought you just sent me a virtual hug that I have to do this now. Congratulations. This is like, it's tougher than any job I've done because you're laying out the whole project. Suddenly you realize, oh my God, I don't have a subcommittee on transportation. What's going to happen to mass transit? What am I going to do with the train loads because it's down so much? What are we going to do about the ferry service? So all of a sudden, there are tentacles to everything we do. Yes. And so we're constantly opening up new flanks that we have to study. I mean, we get calls, lots of calls. I have a wedding in July. Can we hold the wedding? What do you think? I don't know, but those people need to plan ahead. Mm-hmm. So we have to be, really sensitive to them too. So it's like the issues we're dealing with at the macro level, super macro level, and the micro level. So, it's constantly having to go down to the micro level, go back to the macro level constantly.
Yes, ma'am. I can only imagine. And, a little later on in our talk, I'll ask you a little bit more about that. But, that's a great way to kind of put it. And I'm sure it's a complex problem that has many tentacles that, have other tentacles that come out of it. So, yes.
Fascinating. For you guys in the Army, you deal with this complexity all the time.
Yes, ma'am.
And, but in the Army structure, it's a command and control structure. You have to do it, you just do it. In the political structure in the state, it's not a command and control. You've got to work through a political system. And for everything, I'll give you one example. During wartime, you mobilize, it's just got to get done. Here, even though a pandemic to me is more than a war, if you want to put out an RFP to buy something, you still have to go through a process of an RFP. So instead of something that you want to get done in 2 hours, it'll take you 2 weeks. Because if you don't do that, once the pandemic is done, there'll be 15 people in the political system who say, you bypass the process, so you must have benefited from it. I don't need to benefit from it, or nobody does. We just want to solve the problem. So that's one of the issues with this whole approach.
Yes, ma'am. And it sounds like there will probably be, or at least there hopefully will be some changes with the rules and the policies that are put in place to try to approach a situation like this in the future a little bit better.
We have to do that because we have to get both sides of the aisle to say, just do it, because right now we're in pandemic mode and we trust you guys to do the right thing.
Right.
So, these are little things. When business people lead these committees, we think this is a business, so we want to just get it done. Right. We forget that there's a political system that's very different. Mm-hmm. But then these are times when our business sense has to prevail, not the political sense.
Yes.
So, we're working through how best to hold legislators' feet to the fire and say, guys, we have to change. We have to change really fast. Although we have a very good legislature, I think if we went to them, they would give us permission.
Right. Right. Well, thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to pull you back over, though, because we want to learn some more kind of behind the scene things about you first.
All right.
So thank you for letting us know about your being an avid reader and, now reading Danielle Steele. So, hey, all you ladies out there that's reading Danielle Steele, you don't have to be embarrassed about that anymore. Go ahead. All right. So what I'd like to know, and everyone else out here, what advantages do you think that you gained by growing up in India and then, moving to the U.S.? What kind of advantages do you have?
So, growing up in India, we grew up in a middle-class home. And, in those days, in the 50s and the 60s when I was growing up, India was a fairly closed country. It was open, but not fully open. Because we just come out of the British ruling the country for 350 years. Democracy had just happened. Right. And the focus was on a few things in our family: education, 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 and respect for the elders. And very little freedoms. I mean, hey, you don't need to run around, you don't need to do anything. Study hard, go to school, come back, help at home, and just study some more.
Right.
And so, the advantage we had was we grew up with zero distractions. Of course, none of us had internet, but we had no TV in India at that time.
Right.
Okay. And radio stations were local radio stations. We had, the Voice of America or BBC, maybe once a day for half an hour. So there was no real distractions that we had as a group of people. We didn't have too many luxuries. We didn't have money to spend. So that was also good.
Right.
So we made up games. We created toys out of nothing.
Innovation.
We just played amongst ourselves, We never wanted any toys. We never complained because our entire, peer group was the same.
Yeah.
So we actually were happy with what we didn't have because we didn't want it. I think my entire growing up, I had one doll. It's still there at home, but we maintained it so carefully. We didn't throw it away and look for the next doll. We never lost anything. We never threw away anything. Everything was done very, very carefully because you wanted to stretch that 1 rupee much further than, it was possible. We never got an allowance. I don't think until I went off to college, we got a 1 cent allowance. If you wanted something, you asked your parents and they'll just give you whatever it is. You never got an allowance. I don't think I ever saw an allowance. And we never went to movies until our parents saw it and thought it was okay. And my parents never went to movies. So, it was simple. They said, you can't go to a movie unless we go to it. I still remember when we were in college, I think, or high school, The Graduate, the movie had released. It's already edited by the Indian Film Board. And my mom and dad, for the first time, said, okay, the 2 daughters can come to the movie with us.
Right.
So we went. The one scene that was not edited out was when Dustin Hoffman reaches into Mrs. Robinson and touches some private part. The minute that scene came, within the first 10 minutes of the movie, my dad goes, that's enough, we've seen enough, let's leave. So we all left. And
Right.
so, did we get upset? We got upset because he didn't listen to the music. That's all we wanted to listen to. The movie itself, who cares?
Right.
So, it was one of those things where our growing up was very different. So the first time I really left the shores of the US of India, is when I came to the US to Yale. And when you come as an immigrant, you have an immigrant's fear. Are you going to fail? Do you have to go back? Will you shame your family if you had to go back? How do you make ends meet? Because we don't have much money as an immigrant coming here. Very little allowance. You have to earn your own allowance. Work hard, work night shifts, all that stuff. So you come in as an immigrant, you have that immigrant fear, which I still have. And so you work extra hard. You try to work every minute of the day. You don't have too much recreation. And it also helps that in those days, at least at Yale, there were the international students who hung out together. And then there were all the other cool people who hung out together. The two didn't mix. So we know how it is to be excluded, okay? Absolutely. And forever, when I was at Yale, I felt excluded those days. Today, they have more programs to socialize people. Did I care? It hurt a little bit, but screw it. We've come for an education. And the international students from, I'd say, countries that were not white just hung out together. And we were fine. We worked harder. We just studied and studied and studied. So that's what has guided me and pushed me along. And the fact that I always had the family to goad me. And I don't think, Andrea, you might surprise you all. My mother lives with me and I bring it up to her now and then. I remember from the time I was 3 years old, maybe before that she did it, I don't think she's ever hugged us. Because it was assumed that she loved us. My dad also would never hug us. Nobody, no family member will hug. Even now, if I hug my mom, she says, no, don't hug me. My children, when they hug grandma, they say, don't hug me. You can't kiss. We don't kiss on the cheek at all. Not at all. We don't kiss each other because it's transmission of saliva. In today's COVID world, it feels very prescient. But forever, there was no affirmation of love. I tell my kids I love you 20 times a day. I'll text them if they're not here. I don't think my parents ever told us that. And if you did a great job, they never said great job. They said, it's okay. Is that all? So, but you know something? We never said we better go talk to a psychologist if we're screwed up, because everybody around us was in the same boat.
Right.
So that was the way of parenting. So it wasn't a fault of theirs. They didn't know anything else.
Right.
So we just assumed that was that. And we got whacked. If you did one thing wrong, you got corporal punishment. I mean, phew, viciously whacked. And you know what? You said, okay, who are you going to complain to? Everybody around you was getting whacked. So you just say, okay, fine. Where is it going to be, here or here in the back? Just pick the part you're going to whack. Which cheek would you like? Go for it. And after a while, they get bored. But you know what? We try not to make mistakes. So it was a disciplined, West Point kind of upbringing. Very disciplined. Wake up early in the morning, do your homework, do your chores at home, and that's it.
All right. So it sounds like very structured, very focused, especially because as you've already mentioned, you didn't have those distractions. You all were looking to be successful in whatever it was that you chose to pursue.
I think the biggest differentiator was the men in our family, my grandfather, my father, all believed that the women should not be treated differently than the men.
Oh, wow.
And they would push the women to say, study, be whatever you want to be. Don't let anybody hold you back. Why should they hold you back because you're a woman? Go for it. So anytime my mother, who wanted to push us, but society was telling her, you can't push the girls too much, she would waffle between the two. But my father and grandfather would say, absolutely not. Absolutely. These girls are going to fly as much as they want. We are not going to stop this.
Oh, wow. That's amazing, especially as you think about the American culture and the American society. I mean, women are really just now starting to take some of those positions that they should have had opportunities to assume a long time ago. So that's wonderful to hear. That's really wonderful to hear.
In my mother's side of the family, all my cousins, and I think 26 cousins on the mother's side, because she has 8 brothers and sisters, all the family, the women were allowed to soar.
We can definitely learn a lot from that.
Yeah.
Here in America. Yeah. All right. So what else inspired you? Were there things kind of in your young life and or adulthood that also inspired you in regards to sports and or music or something in that realm that kind of, I guess, gave you the oomph to keep going?
So my grandfather, who was a judge, was a very strong person, believed that he should be the role model to teach the children. And he did that with regularity. But he also made us read beyond the schoolwork. I mean, he would not let us sit idle for a minute. His belief was, Satan has work for idle hands. He'll keep repeating that to us again and again. So he believed we should be reading all the time or doing something, writing something. We had to write cursive handwriting, pages of it every day for him. I mean, there was no minute where you just sit there and dream from the window. It just doesn't work. And so we had this urge to keep on doing something and learn. The other thing too, Andrea, is that India was a country that was just emerging. It was not a major country at all then. And so we had to learn about all the other parts of the world because India was insignificant. The big difference between the US and India is that US is so powerful and so big. You don't need to know about the rest of the world. The US is by itself a world. And so people here don't go out of the way to learn as much about the world as we did. The amount we would do about what we call GK or general knowledge is unbelievable. When I think it was 10, I knew the currency, the capitals, the location of every country in the world because they would quiz us on this all the time. Mm-hmm. Leaders of the world. We were encouraged to read the newspaper every morning. Right. And so I think that, you are a product of your circumstances. And if your circumstances are tough, which for many people it is, it's painful, it's tough. It's how can other people step in and help you through those difficult circumstances? But I firmly believe that many of us are a product of our circumstances. And, it's not money, it's how you live that matters, not the money.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for that. All right. So I also know that you majored in chemistry.
Yeah, chemistry and minored in physics and math, yeah.
So I definitely hear that you had the support of your family with, pursuing whatever, realm you wanted to be in. But why chemistry when you decided to do that?
I always loved science because even in high school, at the 8th grade, you branch out into two groups. You go to the humanities or the science, because we were all taking the Cambridge exam at that time, and you had to choose to write the science Cambridge exam or the humanities Cambridge exam. So I went the science route. My sister was in the humanities route. Always loved physics, chemistry, math, biology. Loved all that. So it was logical that when I went to college, I would either major in chemistry or some version of biology. I thought I'd be a doctor first.
Okay.
So that was a logical pathway. But I went to the chemistry route because, I liked chemistry. I loved being in the lab. I loved tinkering with chemicals, watching transformation from one form to another, growing crystals. I loved all that.
That's
So,
awesome. And so I guess what we can kind of take away from that too is if you find a love for it, even if you may be a little apprehensive,
yeah.
especially in the STEM realm, to just push forward with it and give it your all.
I'd go so far as to say, if you have an appetite for STEM, stick with it. Because if you have a solid STEM background, you'll be served very well for the rest of your life. If you don't have any STEM in your background, you can't get it back after break.
Right.
So do not leave STEM at any point. Keep your toe in STEM all the time.
Toe in STEM all the time. I like that. I'm gonna have to write that down.
Absolutely.
All right. So then you make the decision to come to the US. So what kind of was that precursor that said, hey, I'm going to venture out from India and I'm going to, set my eyes on the US? Why did you do that? And kind of what was that process for you?
So during that time, this was the late 70s, or in the 70s, the US was considered the beacon of hope, innovation, excitement. The best students in India were all coming here. And, they were all going to the best universities. And, the Indian education system, if you were very good, you automatically got selected into some institutions. Okay. And those institutions in turn were the breeding ground for the US universities. So the US universities didn't have to select people. These 4 or 5 institutions selected for you through enormous number of entrance exams and all that stuff. So I was in one of those institutions. So when I applied, it was a positive thing by itself. But then I had so many friends already who'd come here. It was like, it was all from the same groups of institutions. So we all knew each other. So then I came here in 1978. I went to Yale only because it was a new program. The interesting twist of integrating public and private. And I just loved what I read. So I applied.
Okay.
And got in. Yeah.
Well, that's awesome because, the next question was going to be, did you kind of see where you were going at that point in time? Because public and private management, you definitely have been using that throughout your career. And during that time, did you have a mentor that kind of helped guide you into maybe that field?
I didn't know where I was going. I'll be honest with you, Andrea. I just came here. I was terrified. And I didn't even think I would get permission from my parents to go. They wanted me to fly, but I thought they'd say, to the US all alone, no chance. Surprising, they allowed me to go, gave me permission to go, which I thank them incredibly for. So I came to the US, and my experience in Yale was nothing short of spectacular. It's a great program, great school. Right through my life, I've had mentors who picked me. I've never gone to somebody and say, hey, can you mentor me? Mentors pick you because they want to hitch their wagon to your success. They see something in you that they like, so they want to become your mentor. And anybody who's been my mentor and supporter from the time I was in school in India to now, I've still kept in touch with them. And the interesting thing about mentors is they give you a piece of advice. If you choose not to take it, you've got to go to them and say, I'm not taking this advice because of the following reason. In fact, I wouldn't say I'm not taking the advice. You say, hey, remember this question I asked you and the advice you gave me? I'm going to implement it slightly differently, and I'll tell you why, for my situation, that's a better implementation. If you don't get back to them, they'll never come and give you advice again because they think you ignore them. So the thing I do is I keep in touch with all my advisors. And whenever I get a chance, I drop them a thank you note or an email saying, I remember you. I was doing something and it occurred to me that, you were such a big force in my life. I remember at a BCG, I was in consulting and I had a client who passed away a couple of years ago. About 4 or 5 years ago, he called me and said, Indra, I hope you know that I was one of your biggest mentors and supporters. I said, Bill, I sure know it. And that's why I've kept in touch with you over the years. And so, not that he did much for me, but the fact is in the background, he must have been providing me some sort of a tailwind by talking to people about me.
Right.
So.
Right. No, that's great advice, especially what we call it in the Army is closing the loop, right?
Yep,
So,
very much.
Yep. So after you've had that conversation and you've gained that insight, I think that's something that any mentee can kind of take back and implement immediately.
Yep. Close the loop. Good point.
Yes, ma'am. But what I would ask is, and I know you said that you never went and approached a mentor. You never kind of did that legwork, right? They came to you. But do you think that mentorship has kind of changed for women over the years? As we think about modern day women right now and kind of how that mentor-mentee relationship works, especially establishing it?
So I've never had a female mentor, okay? Because when I was growing up, there weren't women in the workforce, very few. Most meeting, I was the only woman. As the years have passed, more women have come into the workforce. And I think senior women should look at young women and say, let me mentor this person, because even though this person's not shining now, if I worked with them a little bit, they could shine. And I should work with them because they don't have anybody else to work with. So you've got to do it with the sense of advancing 50% of the population. And the fact that this 50% of the population, which is women, don't have that many mentors in the men that step up to mentor women. So we in the sisterhood have to figure out how to mentor each other in much more aggressive, active ways. And women in turn must be willing to take the advice. If a woman mentors you, don't just say, oh, she doesn't like me, or, she's saying this because she wants me to fail. Don't take it that way. Assume positive intent, work with them. And sometimes the advice they give you may be pretty spectacular.
Absolutely. Wow, that's phenomenal. And, and me as a senior leader in the Army, or somewhat senior leader, right? As we look at the ranks, I too could do a better job at aggressively seeking women out. I know there's times where, and a lot of times where some of our junior, women do not reach up. And sometimes we need to reach down and form that relationship.
Asking for help is not a sign of weakness.
Right.
And I think we should all come to terms with that, because we as women believe that asking for help is a sign of weakness. And it's not.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Whew, I'm getting so many nuggets today.
No, seriously. If you keep on asking for help, then you're using other people as a prop. But now and then say, hey, I'm in a tricky situation. Do you have any suggestions for how I can handle it?
Right.
Okay. And just keep the conversation to a minimum, but ask for pointed help.
Absolutely.
Can be done. Totally can be done.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. So I want to read a quote to you. All right.
Please.
So I was going to be one of the guys, but also be a woman. I was not going to let them push me around. So this is a major concern for women in the military.
You bet.
So how did you actually do that out here in corporate America in a male-dominated workforce, especially in the realms that you were working in? How did you do that successfully?
Actually, Andrea, I tell you something, it was probably easier for me to do it than all of you. I am in awe of all of you women in the Army. Truly, really am. Because you're serving the country selflessly, and you're operating within a command and control structure, where many times you have to deal with a bad behavior from the other sex, who might even be in your chain of command. And so, and you're in a sort of a pressure cooker environment, because you're a small group of women with lots of men, And in a way, the power still rests with the men in the structure in the army. So I am in absolute awe of all you women. In my case, I was the only one. Sometimes there'll be 50 people in the room, I'll be the only woman. The funny part is, I didn't care I was the only woman, because I didn't look at the other men as men. I just looked at them as, hey, my colleagues, we're all here to do a job. Right. So I would always focus on, am I doing the job better than them? Not by talking all the time, but just doing the work, making sure my work product was very good. Being focused on the company and the client as opposed to myself. And I never dressed risque at work. Never, never. In fact, I might have dressed dowdy and a little too long skirts and all that stuff. Sometimes you see my pictures of me in the early days. Oh God, horrible dressing. But you know, the focus I had was on the work, just the work, nothing else. And I remember once there was, I was at a big, I was in a consulting firm, went to speak at a client meeting, and there must have been 50 or 60 men in this group, and I was the only woman. And when it came to the cocktail reception in the evening, you know, I don't drink, I don't eat meat, I don't smoke, I'm a terribly boring person that way. And I went to this cocktail reception, with a glass of water, I'm standing there, and the barmaid, she's a lady, looks at me and goes, how do you keep your cool in front of all these men? You're the only woman. Aren't you going crazy? I looked at the men and said, you know, it never occurred to me they were all men. Never did. Because I didn't care if they were women or men or it. I didn't care. They were colleagues. Absolute, just that one thing. So if you approach the situation, you know, there's nothing genetically wrong with me, but I did not think of them as anything but colleagues.
Right.
So there was never an issue with me in any workplace, because I only thought of them as, hey, you got a job to do, I got a job to do.
Right. And that's so important. Our mindset has a lot of bearing on how we experience that situation, right? How we kind of approach that relationship that we have across the board. Mm-hmm. And I have to totally agree. Not that I have to agree with you, but you know, I've seen that in my own life as well. Yeah. Oh wow. Thank you so much for that. So as I said, we're going to come back to kind of this COVID thing.
Yep.
So while you were with PepsiCo, you led during the Great Reception, really after it, right? So what can or are you taking from the lessons learned during that time frame and kind of applying it to your approach and your method for the Reopen Connecticut and just the COVID crisis across the board?
Great point. You know, the difference, Andrea, is that what we went through during the financial crisis was an economic crisis. Okay, what we're going through now is a pandemic. It's a human crisis. It's an economic crisis if we don't solve the reopening of the economy. In 100 years, we haven't had a pandemic. Spanish flu was the last one. That was 102 years ago. And as a civilization, we've never been through a simultaneous human loss of life crisis, economic and social crisis all at the same time. Right. First time we're going through it. So there is no playbook. In the financial crisis, we're just trying to figure out how to pump more liquidity and get institutions propped up and get back to business. Right. Here we're talking about lives, how to save lives, how to make sure the vulnerable in our population don't get sick and ignored. So it's a whole different ball game. There's a health lever and a business lever. And how do you optimize these two levers so that you never allow too many people to die? Right. And the question is, what is too many people? Even one person is too many. Right. In a normal course of events, if they're going to die, that's different. But because of COVID, even one person dying is too much. So how do you save lives? So it's a whole different challenge, which requires urgency and resolution. So we're having a real series of in-depth conversations as to how to think about this reopening. I'm learning a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And so kind of to piggyback off of that, there's a lot of talk out there right now in a lot of different states about rushing to the startup again, right? Of reopening the cities or the entire state. What's your thoughts about that piece of it? Because I know there's some folks on here that are in Florida. There's some folks on here that are in Georgia, and people who actually listen to this webinar, and it's concerning in some aspects. But then
Yeah.
there are other people that believe that, you know, we need to open the floodgates and get this economy started again. And so
So
with
I
that,
really
you know,
be guided by the science. You know,
yeah,
I honestly believe that the science has to guide us.
yeah,
Okay. Now, whether you believe in the science or not is up to you. I believe in the science. I believe in the experts. I believe in epidemiology, because if you open and have a ton of deaths, those dead people are not going to hold you accountable. So we've chosen to listen to the science, and the science says it's too early to open.
okay,
Science has metrics. We should just follow the metrics. On the other hand, if Georgia, Texas, Ohio, Florida open and things are all okay, then we'll study why it's okay. So it'll be a valuable testing for the rest of the country. But if there's any, excuse me, but if there's any loss of life, I'd feel terrible.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think all of us as soldiers, we understand that,
Yeah.
because it's what we deal with any conflict, any FTX that we have, field training exercise.
Yeah.
So yeah, so thank you. So let's shift a little bit and let's kind of talk about visions.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about clearly having a vision and ensuring that the people that you serve understand that vision, and how has that played out kind of in your life? And you know, just, you know, any feedback that you can kind of give us.
Great question. You can't set a vision without a clear idea of the future. So vision you set because you believe that you know what, some idea of the future, and you want your entity to play this role in the future.
Right.
That's a vision. Okay, the vision is, I want this company or this force of the armed services to play this sort of a role in the future that I see.
Right.
So you've got to lay out a clear articulation and a description of the future, where the company is today, and what's the vision that you have against which you're going to align all the plans because of this future shape of the world. Very few people do this in a systematic, diligent way. They just articulate a vision and people go, what's this vision about?
Right.
On the other hand, you say, let me tell you what this vision is about, why it's timely today. And let me tell you all the ways the world is going to change in front of us. And this is the only vision that's going to take us to the promised land. So once you craft it, you've got to put it in user-friendly language, and then go out there and talk about it yourself with all the missionary zeal that you can muster. Because if you, as a chief communicator, is not out there by video in person talking about it constantly, people will think this is just a slogan and not a real vision. Very important. You have to feel it inside and talk about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So success. I've already heard a lot of great things, but what do you kind of, I guess, value as your most successful moment within your career? And why do you kind of call it that? What did you learn from it?
From my career, you know, CEO tenure is only 6 or 7 years. I was CEO for 12 years. So that's successful, means I kept my job for 12 years. Then I retired, okay? And so many CEOs get thrown out. So that way you could say success. I think success is that we started to change the image of our company from a fun for you, junk food company to, hey, PepsiCo's got a balanced portfolio. We moved it from being viewed as a North American company to a global company. And we viewed it as a company that had great brands, brought fun to you, to, hey, PepsiCo also cares about your health. PepsiCo does good for its farmers. PepsiCo does wonderful environmental initiatives. So we've changed the nature of the company completely. And I think while doing that, you know, I retired, the key thing is that this whole notion of performance and purpose I've carried into my afterlife. What I'm doing at Reopen Connecticut, what I'm doing at West Point. It's all about my sense of purpose says I've got to give back. So that's what I'm doing. So that's really the big thing about when you set a vision. you have to live it, and then you've got to carry it through in your personal life.
Absolutely. And now, if you can put your purpose in one sentence, what would it be?
Personally,
Personally.
I want to make a difference to the world, not just to my family. Make a difference to the world. Contribute to making a difference in the world. And, you know, I live it every day. I look for opportunities to make a difference.
Absolutely. That's admirable.
Yeah.
So with all these great things that you're doing, ma'am, you have to deplete yourself. You probably run yourself into the ground and keep on going until you're forced to stop. So how do you rebuild yourself back up where you're effective like you want to be?
You know, sometimes I want to take a nap and I can't. I don't sleep much. If you want to talk about one issue I have, Andrea, it's my lack of sleep. And I do need to develop a way to sleep. And sometimes I feel very tired. For example, I'm tired now because I didn't sleep last night. But if I go lie down, I'll be wide awake with 15 ideas. So I've just developed this notebook where I'm writing down every idea I have. Because I don't know when it comes out and where. So I have it next to my pillow. I get up and write the idea. It's ridiculous. The brain goes into overdrive when I lie down to sleep, which is exactly the opposite of what it should do.
Right.
So, you know, how do I get the energy to do all this? I don't know. I have no idea. There are days I do get tired. And then I say, I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to sit and think for a while. I won't write anything. I won't look at emails. Mm-hmm. But, you know, I think when you have a crisis, God gives you the courage to rise up to it. And I just go from crisis to crisis.
Right. We got to get you some sleep in between, though.
In between, yeah. I keep swearing I'm going to do that for the whole weekend, but then look at my calendar, there's a meeting every other hour, so what sleep?
Yeah. No, that's great. And you know, and exactly what you're talking about is what I and some of my colleagues and other military folks have to deal with as well, because, you know, our brain keeps going, you know, and sometimes you can't shut it down, but it's definitely very important that we figure out those ways to kind of rejuvenate ourselves so we can give everything that we're doing that 100%. So,
you know, Andrea, I tell you something. I have almost everything that anybody can want. I don't lack for money. I have a roof over my head. I have a family. I have a loving extended family. I have friends. I have stuff to do, busy stuff to do. I have infinite flexibility and freedom. I have zero abuse in the family. I have good kids. Everything works well. Do I have problems now and then? Oh yeah. Sometimes the kids will act up big time, and as they say, you're only as happy as your least happy kid. I have that in spades. But you know what? That's a small problem I have. I don't have any major health issues. That's a great place to be in. Sometimes I look at people who are facing major terminal illness in their family, don't have the money, could be evicted, don't have an extended family to take them in. And I look at all of them and I go, I am so fortunate to be where I am. I have zero complaints about my life. So I'm always looking to, you know, apply somebody else's test. I had a secretary who was going through a bad time. She had family problems. And I'd always apply the Barbara test and say, do I pass the Barbara test? You know, how should always be cheerful in the worst of days. So I think that people like me, there's nothing to complain, nothing, and I will never complain. Absolutely. I'm thankful every day for what I have. Can go tomorrow, but I'm thankful every day for what I have.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. So now I'm going to shift you again.
Okay.
So this time, I want to talk about when you were at the Women in the World Summit. Okay. So you mentioned that you had no plan to run for office, but you wanted to focus on the care crisis.
Yep.
And so inquiring minds would like to know, do you still believe that's your path, or are you possibly looking at maybe running for office at some point in time?
No.
Got it.
All right. Very quick answer. I am focused on figuring out how to integrate work and family. I'll do anything for the country to help out, but I will not be in the political system, because if you want to work and really give back, you shouldn't be in the political system. If you don't want to really work hard, go into the political system, because it's dysfunctional. We have to change.
Right. Yes, ma'am.
Yep.
All right. Well, I have tons more questions that I could ask you, but what I want to do is give the audience a chance to ask questions if there are.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Go for it.
Okay. So let's see, ladies, if you have some questions that you would like to ask Miss Nooyi, please go ahead and put it in the Q&A section, and I'll take a look at it. But if not, don't feel compelled to have to ask a question. But this is just your time if you'd like to bring something up. All right. And while we're waiting to see if there's some questions that are going to come in, what is the main book that you have passed out to your mentees in the past?
Oh, I've passed out a lot of books. I've passed out things about, mindfulness, how to chill and calm down. I've passed out books on technology changing and how that's going to impact our life. I've passed out books on artificial intelligence. What I used to do is every year during Christmas, I would send the board of directors 5 or 6 books that I found fascinating. I'd buy them all a little kit of books to read. And very often I'd give my direct reports a book that they should read. Some would read, some wouldn't read it.
Right.
But I'd always send them. It changes all the time. Around the house, I have 3 books I'm reading. Depending on the room I'm in, I'll pick up that book and read. Okay, I actually read books, not on the iPad or Kindle. So I like to read the books. So there are books and books and books around our house. So I'm reading all the time. My God, I'm reading all the time.
All right, that's great. So we do have one question.
Okay.
So you mentioned that you always focused on the work. Did your colleagues perceive you differently as a woman? What impact did you have, and how did you overcome it?
They always knew that I was only focused on the work and home. And so the question was, I didn't socialize. I didn't go anywhere. So they always looked at me as not the nerd, but somebody who's just going to work and go home, work and go. Because I had kids at home, so I had to worry about all that. So I never really got invited or went out to anybody's homes. I just never did. And I didn't care because there wasn't enough time to do all of it.
Right.
And so you could say that I didn't golf. I didn't do anything that was, business sports. So people sort of said, hey, this is Indra. She's different. She's not going to come. She's not going to play golf. She doesn't come to barbecues. Sometimes they'd invite me to the carnivore ball. I said, thank you, I can't come. I'm not a carnivore. Or they would invite me to the Hamptons for a summer ball and say, you have to wear Hampton summer outfit. I said, I don't have a Hampton summer outfit. I'm not coming.
Right.
So, I did not define myself on which social circle I was in. Okay. And so people just accepted me for that. They just said, this is who she is, just accept it and get on.
All right. So I think what the military ladies can kind of take away from this too is I think sometimes we feel obligated to do some of the things that maybe the boys are doing. But it's okay to be different, and it's okay to say, no, you're not going to be involved in it.
As long as you're going to differentiate yourself differently.
Mm-hmm.
Don't try to have a herd mentality. Doesn't work.
Right. All right. So another question here, how did you build PepsiCo team to align with a changing image? And then were there any leaders who weren't aligned, and how did you manage that?
A lot of leaders kept saying, why can't we just stay doing what we're doing? The funny part is everyone changed their own habits, but somehow felt that the company shouldn't change. So you've got to appeal to them to say, wait a second, if you've changed your habits personally, why shouldn't we change as a company? Yeah. Aren't many consumers like you who make up the company? Yeah, but do we have to change? First, you try talking to them and talking to them and talking to them. Then you convince the people around them to see if they can change him or her. And then if they don't change, you got to get rid of them. No choice.
Yeah.
I mean, they pay leaders to be a little ruthless. And
right.
You have no choice but to be ruthless.
Right. Kind of goes back to that saying that it's lonely at the top sometimes.
You bet. You bet.
Yeah. All
Yeah.
right. So we have Julie that has a question. I'm in a corporate career now, post-military, and trying to figure out how to navigate my work and how to best showcase my contributions and potential. What advice do you have to best advocate for myself in my career?
I think the big question is, does she feel she's being underappreciated now? That's the first question. And if you're being underappreciated, ask somebody, why is it that you don't value my input? Are they talking over you? Are they ignoring your input? Are they not including you in meetings? What's the reason that you feel underappreciated? If you feel you're being appreciated, but you need to be appreciated even more, okay? There's one of two reasons. One, they may not value your input as much, or some of the people in your team are feeling threatened about a woman rising, which happens all the time.
Right.
So in those cases, all that you have to do is keep falling back on your competence. And when you're very, very good at something, they have to listen to you because you're the expert in this subject.
Right.
So you've got to have a hip pocket skill that makes you very competent at something.
And so I know with military women, a lot of the times we have imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And so Julie, hopefully that helped you, and you just realized that you got to stand on your own competence and make your own way.
I'm going to tell you something, if it'll make you feel bad or feel better. I too had imposter syndrome a lot. Even recently, I would say, God, how did I get all of this?
Right.
How did I make it here? I feel almost so-and-so so much better than me, and that's how I perceived everything. Now I've started to reopen Connecticut. I realize I'm probably better than I thought I was. Okay, because I'm trying to pull together this huge task force, and I know how the pieces come together, and many of the others don't. So I'm sitting here going, why do I have this imposter syndrome when I can do this in my sleep?
Right.
Okay, why do I not have confidence in this incredible capability I have? I don't have an answer. So I think having this imposter syndrome, I hate those words.
Right.
But that's reality. Many of us have it.
Yes, ma'am. Well, we have one last question for you.
Sure.
So you brought your kids to the office if you were working late.
Mm-hmm.
How did you enable the parents coming up behind you?
Oh, we set up daycare centers in our key sites, on-site, near-site. And, we encourage people, if you want to bring your kids after hours, bring them in. And so children are very much part of the PepsiCo culture. Once a year, we had a big, we bought out a amusement park, and every employee in the headquarter building could bring their kids to it, and unlimited play, free. Unlimited cotton candy, unlimited food, unlimited music, unlimited, going on the rides. And remember, it's just the PepsiCo people, so everybody's looking out for each other. Right. That they thought that was heaven. No need to ask mom for coupons or anything. Just go on any ride, anything you want. Have 2 and 3 cotton candies on the rides. You could see that. Not that I like them having so much cotton candy, but it was liberation, total liberation.
Absolutely.
And so we encourage people, because without kids, we have no future consumers and future employees.
That's right.
So we normalized family and children.
I wonder if we could do something like that in the military. I definitely believe that we try to approach that in some situations, but it's just a bit harder to do it.
You're a very different environment. Fewer degrees of freedom than companies, because CEOs and companies can make a lot of changes. You guys, the impact is on a much broader scale, and you're always in a crisis situation, because whenever there's a crisis, you guys are called in.
Right. Yes, ma'am. Well, those are our questions, and they were great questions. So thank you, everyone who's on the call right now, for those wonderful questions. And Ms. Indra, I want to leave the last few minutes of our time together for any parting comments or insight that you'd like to give us, and just say from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for being here with us.
Pleasure, Andrea, and pleasure talking to all of you. It's been a real privilege for me to get to know you and to be part of the West Point community. I haven't been there in a while because of COVID. I miss you all. I really do. And I keep talking to Colonel Spain and to Jason Bogardis, and I'm like, when are we going to get back together? Because there was a sense of community, a sense of family. And I remember running into some of your young cadets in Greenwich, Connecticut. And I tell you, I had an immediate affection that went out for all of them, because I feel we're all part of the same sisterhood, the same kinship. I'd say that the next few decades are the decades of women, because women are badly needed in every walk of life. Absolutely. 70% of the top grades are being gotten by women in high schools. 53% of the top grades in colleges are being gotten by women. So if you don't elevate women to more important positions, it's like saying, we're not going to elevate from the best and brightest, we're going to elevate from people who are not the best and the brightest. That's a wrong message for the company. So I'm very optimistic about the future for women, but we have to create that future. Nobody's going to create it for us. We have to stand up and speak up if we see something wrong. We have to stand up and make sure that we support each other. There's a lot we can do for each other. But I'm very, very positive about female participation. Sometimes I think to myself, with women running every part of the government, would there be COVID? Probably not, because we'd have seen it coming earlier and we'd have stopped it, and we'd have organized on COVID way better. That's just my humble opinion about women.
Right.
But I mean, I just see women governors just together. They know what they're doing. So I have great, great, great confidence. The future of the world is women. So we are the most awesome beings that walk the face of the earth. Don't forget that.
Don't forget that, ladies. All right.